For the last 2 weeks, we've looked at what the book of Job has to teach us about the wide gulf between God and man, and about the very fact of suffering that seems to happen without reason or recourse. At the same time, we've been reading the Gospel of Mark. We've watched the disciples argue among themselves over who is the greatest, who should sit at the right hand of Jesus in his glory, while Jesus is saying to them, whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave to all. Does that sound like the good news? But it is. Because Jesus has experienced all our suffering. He knows who we are and how we are. He shows us that not all suffering is bad, that suffering can be redemptive. And then Jesus shows us the path home, the way to the kingdom in this world and the next. Now, what if I were to say to you, of whatever suffering you happen to be going through, what if I were to say, you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy? Well, coming from me, that would just be a platitude, wouldn't it? Something you might say to someone to cheer them up when they're going through a difficult time. But it wouldn't mean much, would it? When life is hard, and someone says something like that to you in the midst of all your pain, it's going to sound like they're saying, oh, get over it, it's not all that bad, and who wants to hear that? But if a person who said that to you had cancer in her lungs, spine, and liver, and had a 2% chance of survival, and she said, you can't wait until life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. And she said it with a smile upon her face. And then she said, I'm okay. Those words would be a lot different, wouldn't they? They'd have a different significance. They'd truly speak to you. And that's what a singer with a stage name, Nightbirde, said on America's Got Talent. And then she said, it's important for people to know that I'm so much more than the bad things that happen to me. So much more than the bad things that happen to me. Our church has a YouTube channel. We have 21 subscribers. On a given month, 200 people tune in to catch a service or a sermon. Nightbirde has been watched so far by almost 200 million people. And if those people wonder how it is that she's able to be like that, and they say, I don't know what she's got, but I want that. And then if they dig a little deeper, maybe they read her blog. They discover that she's a Christian. She is living in this world and in the kingdom. She has a foot in each. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. Throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and ran to Jesus. Nightbirde is that blind beggar sitting by the side of the road. We are all that blind beggar sitting beside the road. Nightbirde's faith has made her well, whatever happens to her body. And if, like blind Bartimaeus, you throw aside everything and rush to Jesus, then your faith will make you well also. You will see again through the eyes of faith. Today's reading from Job is Job's response to the words God spoke out of the whirlwind. Job says, I did not understand things too wonderful for me that I did not know. At last, Job has recognized the omnipotence of God. And he confesses his humility. I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. He knows now the immediacy of God's presence and repents before God. Job now understands that God's will is not arbitrary. God is not playing with him. God has a deliberate purpose for Job. A purpose that is necessarily hidden from Job, hidden from all mortals, because of the distance between us and God, the very fact that we are mortal. In the end, the Lord restored the fortunes of Job. But notice the words that come right after that. The Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends. A more literal translation is when he had prayed on behalf of his neighbors. See, Job is no longer enslaved to self. He's recognized that the mercy of God is operating here. And he's no longer enslaved to the egocentric aspect of everything he's lost. He's repentant. He's cleansed. He's converted. And Job receives his reward from God. And that reward isn't just all the things that are enumerated. His reward is the very thing that God required of him. So follow closely on this one. God said you must be able to pray on behalf of others. And now that you're praying for others, your reward is that you can pray for others. Now that you're living for others, you can live for others. The very thing he asked is the reward. And how can that be? Think about it. Think of a time when you've given a gift to someone, and you really thought about it, and you got the perfect gift, and everything worked out exactly the way you thought it was. I'm thinking of a Christmas a few years back when we're trying to figure out what to give to our oldest son, Nick. And he's an avid golfer, and I found this golfing cap. He said, we'll give him a golfing cap. And Rhonda says, you don't give somebody a cap for Christmas. I said, no, trust me. And for some reason she did. So we gave him this cap. He loved the cap. He wears it to this day. He swears that it took 2 strokes off his game.
Oh, yeah.
Now you can imagine how that made us feel. And when you had an experience like that, how did it make you feel compared to somebody giving you a very nice gift, even the perfect gift. When we accept the mercy of God and His love begins to flow through us to others, that is its own reward. God has shown Job compassion, and Job is now able to show compassion for his neighbors. It's like Paul wrote in the letter to the Corinthians. The Father of mercies and the God of all consolation, who consoles us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to console those who are in any affliction. He gives us mercy and love so that we can show mercy and love to others. When we run to God and experience His mercy, the reward may arrive in ways that we don't expect. In fact, I would venture to say that it is never what we expect. Bartimaeus said, "My teacher, let me see again." And Jesus said, "Your faith has healed you," and he sees. But we may be healed in ways that we cannot expect or comprehend. Have you ever asked God for something and discovered that He's given you something else that you didn't know that you needed it, but it was better than what you expected? Bartimaeus received his eyesight. Will Nightbirde's cancer disappear? I don't know. You don't know. We're mortal. We're not God. But I would suggest to you that whether she lives or dies, her reward is great already. God has already shown her His mercy. And now she can share that compassion with millions of other people. Because we are human beings, we start out so full of ourselves. We want the life we want. We want answers to the questions that arise just because we are alive. If something happens to us, we say, "Why me?" It's not just that we want answers, we want easy answers. Acceptance of life as it is so hard for us because we can't accept that we don't have all the answers, that we can't have all the answers. We can't accept that we're not the equal of God. So how do you get to a place of that kind of acceptance? The acceptance of Job at the end of his story. The acceptance of Nightbirde in the midst of her story. The acceptance of who we are and where we are in our own stories. Have you ever, in despair, cried out, "Why me?" Was that helpful? We have so little time in this life. Why waste it saying, "Why me?" I caught an interview when Nightbirde was asked that question. Have you ever said, "Why me?" And her response was, "I try not to occupy myself with questions that are too big for myself to answer." That's exactly where Job wound up. Accepting that there are things that are too big for us, too difficult, too terrible, too beautiful for us in this life. Nightbirde also says that she's not planning my legacy, I'm planning my future. And she went on to say, some people would call that blind denial, but I prefer to call it rebellious hope. That is a great concept. Rebellious hope. Rebellion not against God, but rebellion against expectation. The desires and expectations we have for ourselves, or the expectations that others have of us, and hope, founded in faith in the promises of God, not in our own abilities, our own competence, our own power, but founded in faith and the merciful work of God in our lives. We don't get there all at once. It's hard work. Nightbirde said she wasn't always the way she is now. When you're faced with so many blows to the gut, she said, you find out what you're made of, and you are given the opportunity to choose what you will become. You are given the opportunity to choose what you will become. When we are so busy taking care of ourselves, what we want, it's hard to be aware of God's mercy. Sometimes we have to be hit upside the head before we stop thinking that we're in charge. Whatever our situation, our affliction, our addiction, whatever we are, wherever we are, what we do with our lives is a choice. We can weep and wail, or we can celebrate who we are as children of God. We can choose to live in the dark depths of anger, depression, and remorse, or we can walk in the light of God's mercy. It's a choice. God looks upon his children, most of us as blind as Bartimaeus. None of us deserving God's mercy, because there's nothing we can do to deserve the mercy of a God who will send his Son to walk among us, eventually to die for us and to redeem us. We don't deserve anything like that. We can't earn that. But God looks upon us as he did his disciples, as he did the rich young man. He looks upon us and he loves us. God, in his mercy, forgave Job and restored his life to him. And in his mercy, God will do that for us too. Even if you only have a 2% chance of surviving the next 3 months, for in his mercy, God restores our lives even when we die. All you have to do is to do as Bartimaeus did. Be present to God. Make the decision to spring up. Cast off the cloak that hides your true self. And run to Jesus crying, my Lord, let me see again. After Bartimaeus regained his sight, we are told, he followed Jesus along the way. That way, all of God's ways are mysterious to you and me, but they are also merciful. So having experienced the love of God, let us follow his Christ who walked among us. Lord, have mercy. Amen.